Welcome to Fireside Giants, a featured podcast by Empire Sports Media. I'm your host, Alexander Wilson, and my co-hosts, Anthony Rivardo and Mike Irapino. Make sure to give us a follow on Twitter, Alex Wilson ESM, Anthony _Rivardo, and Mike _NYY. We are back at it with another episode of Fireside Giants, and we got some news, which is better than no news. And, sports are coming back hopefully soon. If you live in New York, Andrew Cuomo's like, we want sports back. It's such a big boost to the economy. And there's just going to be no fans. So we have something to look forward to in the coming weeks. But to get started, I just want to see how Anthony and Mike are doing.
All is well for me. Florida is finally reopening gyms and other things to limited capacities. So I'm starting to go out in public a little bit more, wearing my mask and gloves. So things are starting to get back to normal, and I'm pretty happy about it.
Yeah, life isn't, it's not normal yet, but the weather here has been really good, in Jersey at least, and that's something to be happy about. So I've been outside a lot. I'm actually sweating my you-know-what off right now, but happy to be talking Giants right now.
That's great. Well, at least, we're kind of returning back to normal slowly but surely. However, if you listened to last episode and if you've been kind of keeping up with the latest Giants news, we all know about DeAndre Baker and what he's going through right now. And since our last episode, a lot of new information has come up, and I think it's worth talking about. Everyone kind of rushed to a conclusion, including myself, that he, was probably had done these things just based on how significant and serious it was. It seemed like it was pretty clear that there was something going on here. So far, a lot of things have changed. The first thing being that initially the witnesses that saw him rob everybody and take all this stuff have now recanted those statements and claim that, in fact, he wasn't even really involved in it and that he didn't do anything wrong. So whether they were paid off or it didn't happen, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. If this thing if he gets exonerated, essentially, and this case gets thrown out the window, Baker's a Giant tomorrow. He's not going anywhere. Now, what do you guys think happens if, he goes scot-free and nothing ends up happening from the accusations made against him, but the Giants are still sitting here like, okay, let him deal with his legal stuff, but we also don't really want a player that's going through these kind of legal troubles on our team. It's kind of significant, and do you think they're going to do their own investigation, and do you think they're just going to be like, you know what, if he didn't get charged with anything, then he didn't do anything wrong, and we're just going to welcome him back with open arms? What do you think happens there?
I think somewhere in between. I don't think they'll do their own full investigation, but I don't think it's going to be open arms that they welcome him back with. I think it's going to be almost like probation, like you're welcomed back, but you're on thin ice. Because he should have been on thin ice to begin with the whole sleeping in the meetings last year. So I don't think they should welcome him back with open arms, like I was saying, but I do think that, like his lawyer said, it could be a situation like Ray Lewis in a way, where he has a turnaround after this, and I think that's what we really need to hope for, because obviously he wasn't very good last year in general, so hopefully this is like a scared straight thing and he can really get his act together in 2020.
Yeah, it's looking better and better as the days go on here. I'll admit I have not been keeping up with it too much, but if what you're saying is true and these quote-unquote witnesses are saying that he wasn't even involved, I don't know how you go from, he told someone to shoot somebody to he's not involved. It's a very drastic change here, but yeah, if this stuff is true, then he'll be on thin ice, I think, regardless next year. But unless he's suspended by the NFL, I think he, probably would be back. If he was completely innocent here and didn't do any of this stuff, then, there's no reason to just give up on a first-round pick after 1 year because of these allegations if they're not even true.
Right. I agree with you. I think, he probably deserves a second chance if he's exonerated from these things. There's no way to actually tell if they're true, especially if the case is dismissed. And it's looking like it's going to go that way. We do know that Florida is pretty tough when it comes to punishing people for crimes. But so far it looks like the evidence is dwindling, and they just pretty much pleaded non-guilty to all 8 charges. So we'll see what happens with that. His lawyer, though, he said, I'll read you guys a quote from, I think it was yesterday. "Honest to God, I'm doing this almost 40 years, dealing with a lot of people, a lot of athletes. His state of mind is a 180 from what I've seen. When I first met him and interviewed him, he was very upset, taken aback, but now he's got fire back in him and he realizes he has the opportunity to become Ray Lewis and not Ray Rice." He went on to say, he doesn't want to lose his job and he wants to prove to the general manager, which is Dave Gettleman, that he deserves the draft choice they gave up and he wants to be a first rounder again. He admits he had a tough season last year. This is going to make it tougher. At this point, it's going to be up to him. I think this, obviously he's being paid to say and defend Baker at all costs. But if what he's saying is true and Baker kind of is using this as a learning experience and building off of what he, did wrong last year, what he did wrong in this circumstance, I think that the Giants should give him another chance. I think it's worth it just because you don't want to give up on a guy. He's like 22 years old. Kids make mistakes. People make mistakes. And if he's let go with no charges, then I think he'll have to earn his way back onto this roster. But I think he's going to do everything it takes, and maybe it changes him for the better. Do you think that he bounces back from this? Let's say in a perfect world, he's exonerated and he bounces back from this. Do you think that he ends up having a better 2020 season because of it?
I think so, because I think now he has more to prove than he initially did. Like, we probably felt that he had a lot to prove, but we don't know if he did. But now that this has happened and there's a lot of questions surrounding his reputation and everything, he's probably going to want to play better and act better in the locker room behind the scenes, so no more reports go out to make him look any worse regarding his reputation. So I think that this can definitely be a motivating factor for him, and he can improve a lot in 2020.
Yeah, sometimes you need a fire lit under you, and this could definitely be what he needs for sure. I did a video on my other channel about Roddy White recently. He did his first 2 years, he was not understanding the playbook. He was fooling around. He was going to, bars and stuff. But after the Falcons moved him down the depth chart, he eventually just had this breakout third year. And I know it's Baker's second year, so it's not the exact same case. But sometimes in situations like this, when you face adversity for the first time in your life, basically, because these athletes, he went to Georgia and probably was given everything, growing up. He's a gifted athlete, all that stuff. So when you have a fire lit under you, sometimes it can bring out the best of you. And we got to hope that's the case. But I would not say for 1 second he's definitely the cornerback 2 next year. That was what we've been saying the offseason, basically. It's James Bradbury and DeAndre Baker starting opposite each other. I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like he has to earn his spot for sure. Joe Judge has said the same thing, so I think it's we'll probably get Bradbury starting, obviously, but opposite of him, I think it's up for grabs right now.
I like that. I really like the concept of looking at Baker now and saying, you know what? Your job is not solidified. It's not cemented with us. We could cut you. We could let you go and just say, we don't want any of this bad image associated with the Giants anymore. The Giants have had enough of that stuff the past 5 years. With John Brown, or was it Josh Brown?
Josh, yeah.
A couple of years ago when he domestic violence and the Giants kept him for a few extra weeks there. That was a really bad look, really, really bad. They've gone through a bunch of questionable things, and this is another one that's damaging an illustrious franchise's image. They have to be a little bit more careful moving forward. If he gets exonerated, then whatever. For as far as we know, nothing happened. It didn't even happen. But with that being said, I think it's fair that the Giants say to him, your job is not yours right now. Sam Beal is there. Even Corey Ballantyne is there. Julian Love is there. You could even throw Darnay Holmes into the mix. So I agree with you guys. I think that he should be working his butt off now, because this should tell him how sensitive his entire career really is, not just his job on the Giants.
Yeah, I agree. It should be a reality check for him. He needs to take things a lot more seriously. And, I don't know we don't know if this happened or not. We hope it didn't. And we don't know if he had some involvement, even if he is innocent of these allegations. But whatever the case may be, I hope he realizes maybe to surround himself with better people and avoid situations that could potentially go the wrong way or be a bad look. So I hope he, regardless of whether he did this or did not, I hope he learned a valuable lesson from it.
Yeah, sometimes if you're an athlete, especially a first-round pick, you sometimes feel invincible. Maybe you feel above the law. But when you get that reality check of like, oh, man, I almost just went to jail for this, then, you come back to earth and say, all right, I have to earn everything I'm given here. Nothing here is given. So I think this might put his attitude in the right place, honestly. He came in cocky in the NFL. He admitted last year he had a bad year. If his lawyer's saying the truth here, at least he admitted it. So I liked hearing that. And, hopefully he just proves us wrong in year 2.
Right. So I don't want to spend too much time on Baker before the facts come out, and I want to make sure that we're reporting the right stuff here and we're being fair to him. So I want to move on to Daniel Jones and what we are going to expect from him in year 2. I was looking a lot about his weaknesses and strengths and what we should be expecting him to succeed with, and why Jason Garrett is going to help him. But I kind of want to talk about his intangibles for a second, because that's a factor of Jones that we don't really talk about very often. He's very Eli Manning-esque when it comes to his personality. And I want to read you a little bit from Benny Fowler's podcast that he had with Eli. This was actually pretty interesting. I didn't even realize Benny Fowler had a podcast, so it was pretty good content. And there was one really cool thing that I liked that Jones did. That was like, wow, okay, he doesn't want to be in the NFL to make millions of dollars. That's a byproduct for him. It is more about the love of the game and wanting to be great at something. So Benny Fowler essentially asked him, after the Minnesota game, which he ended up having, I think, one interception. He had like 184 yards. It was a really bad game for Jones in his young career. But he asked him, after the Minnesota game, you had missed some throws that you wanted to get back, and you hit me up, you came and picked me up, and you wanted to go through those plays that you had messed up. Where did that come from? So essentially, Jones, after the game had already ended, went to Benny Fowler and was like, hey man, like I want to rerun those plays that I messed up on, because I want to learn from them and see what I did wrong. And this was like immediately after the game. And he said, and this was his response, I think just being very focused on it, it's about how important it is to you. So he's talking about the game of football. And football is certainly very important to me. I wanted to feel like I had made progress toward the things I'd messed up on it, that I didn't do well, and I had an opportunity to correct them before I went to sleep that day. So he's the type of guy, it seems to me, that really wants to focus on getting better and wants to do anything that it takes before he goes to bed. He seems a little OCD in a good way. He wants to be all over those mistakes, and he wants to correct them before he has an opportunity to do it again. So when you're looking at, Anthony, I'm going to ask you this. When you're looking at Daniel Jones, do you see a leader, a competitor, and somebody that can be a great quarterback? Or do you see someone that, might be a little scared at times, might be a little uneasy in the pocket, and is still, kind of holding on to those youthful tendencies that he was, kind of used to at Duke?
I'd say I kind of see both. I do see the potential to be a great quarterback, and I see, obviously, with quotes like this, tremendous work ethic and a desire to improve, and I think that's really valuable. But he is a young quarterback who's trying to learn how to adjust to the NFL game, and that does show up in his performance, or at least it did in his rookie season. But that's it's a process, You can even think Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is by far the best player in the NFL right now. But in that rookie season, he played in one game, and it wasn't like magical Patrick Mahomes. He struggled in that game. He just had to learn and adjust to the NFL. And Daniel Jones is going to have to do the exact same thing. And I think this is the way you do it. This is how you improve and adjust. This is exactly the quote that you just read, and it's music to my ears. It should be music to all of our ears. It's really phenomenal to hear that, and it's why I do believe that Daniel Jones has the potential to be like a top 10, maybe top 5 quarterback in the NFL.
He definitely is a leader. I've had no concerns about that ever since we drafted him, and he's not the leader in the same way like a Cam Newton or a Baker Mayfield is, like the outspoken type leader, but kind of a quiet leader that leads by example, like Eli Manning did for the past 15 to 17 years. So I have no problems about that whatsoever, and I like that, how you mess up on one play in a game, you want to go back and fix it. It's kind of like in basketball when you miss a shot and you want to end your day on making a shot. It's kind of like that in a way, if I can compare it to anything. So I love that. I mean, anytime you make a mistake, he wasn't terrible in that Vikings game, if I remember correctly. He maybe had an interception in there, as you said, and maybe a fumble, whatever, but it wasn't the worst performance in the world. And I'm sure a guy with some non-OCD would be like, all right, whatever, we'll get him next week. But he wanted to go out there and just fix it and work on his craft and stuff like that. So I love hearing that. That's great stuff.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think that it was really, really phenomenal to see his dedication to the game. And a lot of people don't do that in their own professions. So it's pretty good to see, as a Giants fan, what he is, what he desires to be as a quarterback in the NFL. Now, I do want to talk about some of his weaknesses and what, we should be looking for in terms of improvement, because that is essential. And he does have a lot of weaknesses. Don't get it wrong. Every quarterback has their deficiencies, and Jones is not excluded from that list. So the things that I noticed that I didn't really like about him last year was obviously the fumbles. His awareness in the pocket was a pretty bad. He lost, I think, 11 fumbles of 18 that were forced. So right off the bat, we can say that he needs to increase his ball security. About a week ago, he released some quotes on a Zoom call that, he said ball security should be easy to fix. It's a simple fix. For Tiki Barber it was. Maybe he's hanging out with Tiki and Tom. I don't know. But the reality is that needs to be solved. And once that's solved, we can start to see him open up as a passer and a runner. However, the other weaknesses that I also have seen was he looks a little scared in the pocket at times. He gets a little jumpy. And that's where I think, he needs to kind of develop, and the scheme needs to develop around him. I like him as more of like a short to intermediate quarterback. I don't think he should be taking tons of deep balls like Patrick Mahomes every game because, one, he doesn't have a receiver like Tyreek Hill running, 4.2 40-yard dash down the field. So that's, one thing that I don't really like. I think that they should be focusing on the intermediate and moving the ball, keeping the ball with the offense. I want to keep our defense off the field as much as possible. And I think the other weaknesses I've seen probably rely on it's not really him. It's more about the injuries on offense. We really didn't see the full version of Jones that we wanted to because he didn't play a single game in 2019 where he actually had his full arsenal of guys. So that's a big con to, how we evaluate him. But how are you guys seeing him? And are you seeing these same deficiencies, maybe more or less?
I think definitely the pocket presence is the biggest flaw in his game right now, but I don't necessarily see what you said with being scared in the pocket. I think almost the opposite. He's like too brave in the pocket and kind of just stands in there and gets tunnel vision looking downfield and is really oblivious sometimes, and then he gets whacked from behind and fumbles the ball. I think that's the problem, and that's really just pocket awareness. He needs to know when the rush is coming and when to get rid of the ball. But I don't see him being scared and trying to get rid of it too soon. I think he holds on to it too long and takes some unnecessary hits sometimes. And obviously he was injured last year, so we want to see him avoid those hits. I don't want to see him getting injured again. That's by far the biggest thing that he needs to work on. But outside of that, I think he's really accurate. And I think throwing the football, his decision-making was pretty good. It's just about getting it out quicker, running a more fast-paced offense, and holding on to the football and not fumbling. But I think the accuracy is just as good as you can ask for.
Yeah, I mean, every young player has their deficiencies, so I'm not going to sit here and say Daniel Jones is the perfect product. I mean, my concerns for him are the fumbling issues, making smarter decisions with the ball. He had some bad throws last year. I'm sure we can all admit that. His deep accuracy, like outside the hashes, I think, I've had questions about his arm strength in the past. He does not have the worst arm in the league. I'm not saying that. I think it's an average for the NFL type arm. But when he's targeting guys outside the hash marks and has to make a pinpoint throw with some velocity on it, sometimes it's underthrown and stuff like that. So that's a concern for me. Then you have like the throwing in the rain in poor conditions. We saw a game in Duke where he was terrible in the rain. There was a couple of games last year, I feel like. The Packers game, he had 3 interceptions in the snow. And then there was the Eagles game. Right. There was the Eagles game, Arizona, the Eagles game, last game of the year. Those were some bad showings by him. So you have to improve in the bad weather, especially playing at MetLife. Then there's the jittery feet in the pocket and the pocket awareness. So if he can fix that stuff, which I do think most of it is fixable, I literally think all of that is fixable, honestly, because we've seen guys improve their arm strength throughout their career. I think Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers come to mind when that happens. They didn't have the best arms coming into the league, but of course they just, worked on that stuff and got better. So I do think everything here for Jones is fixable, and I do think, as you guys said, he should be an intermediate passer. We should not be asking him to chuck the ball down the field, on 20-plus yard throws, 10-plus times a game. I think he's a great intermediate passer. We run the ball 2 plays. It's a 3rd and short. Ask Daniel Jones to throw a ball accurately and just keep moving the sticks and just put together long drives for the offense.
Yeah, and I want to build off that long drive statement. And I tweeted about this morning, and it's what, Tuesday now, right? I'm losing track of my days.
Yeah. I think
so I tweeted this morning how important the offensive line is to the success of the entire team. It's arguably, I think, the most important unit, not position, but unit on any given team. Because think about how everything kind of correlates back to and stems from the offensive line. The Giants invested a ton of capital this offseason, the past really 2 years, into rebuilding it. A good offensive line gives more time to your quarterback to sit in the pocket and make good throws. So already you're seeing your quarterback playing better because you have a good offensive line, which is what has made Dak Prescott look so great these last few years. Then it opens up more holes in the running game. So now we have Saquon Barkley who can actually benefit as well. which then in terms helps the wide receivers because now you can activate play action. You can, quarterback has more time in the pocket. Receivers are getting open, have more time to get open. You can also, stem it to that as well. But then the fourth tier is the defense stays off the field. So you can mitigate fatigue, injury, so many different things that ultimately hurt the offense or hurt the team in the long run. So that's how important the offensive line is to everything. And I think Jones is going to see, we're going to see a different version of Daniel Jones in year 2 because, one, he's going to have more time in the pocket. Saquon Barkley is healthy. His weapons are healthy. And he has Jason Garrett who's going to run hopefully a similar system to Kellen Moore with Dallas. Heavy doses of running the football, but also creative play schemes and just styles against specific teams. So one thing that I saw with Pat Shurmur and Ben McAdoo the past few years, they would install a specific system that would essentially be the same week in and week out. We'd see a little bit of differences to attack weaknesses on opposing defenses, but what Kellen Moore does in Dallas is incredible. If you actually read about it, I was just doing a lot of studying on his system. He changes his style and system, his scheme, pretty much every week, to fit and adapt to the opposing defense. If Jason Garrett can do that similar thing, I think Daniel Jones is going to have a phenomenal year, and I think the Giants are going to benefit so much. However, I do think it's going to take a little while for him to get that down. But I just want to wrap up the Daniel Jones segment. Anthony, what are you predicting his stats to be in 2020?
I think he'll easily be a 4,000-yard passer, and I think maybe around 26 touchdown passes and 12 to 14 interceptions. I think it'll be kind of a slightly above average year. I don't think he's going to take that huge leap in year 2 because obviously shortened off season, not as much time in the facility with the coaches because of coronavirus and all of that. So it could be a little challenging getting up to speed once we finally get football back. So it might be a slow start, but I do think we're going to see a lot of improvement, and especially in that ball security area. But I think year 3 is when you're going to see him take that big jump and really become a much better quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with with most of that. I don't know about the 4,000 yards part. Mine was I had him down for 16 starts, hopefully, 3,600 yards, 27 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 300 rushing yards, and 10 fumbles. So going from 18 to 10 fumbles, that's much better. I don't think he'll fix the whole thing in one off season. I hope I'm wrong, but that'd be a good year. I do think year 3 is the breakout year for him, hopefully, if it all happens. But I expect him to have a good year next year. It won't be an MVP year. I'd be surprised by that, honestly, and it won't be a terrible year. I think it'll be a year where we see Daniel Jones improve in some departments, and that's pretty much all we can ask for.
I agree. I think improvement is all we can ask for, especially with a rookie left tackle in Andrew Thomas, who I think will perform well, but there has to be chemistry development there. There's a lot that goes into that. But assuming he plays all 16 games, I'm going to go with about 3,800 yards, so right in between you guys. I'm going to say he gets to 30 touchdowns because I think with all of his weapons healthy, we should see a nice uptick in that category. I think Saquon Barkley is going to steal a bunch of those on the ground, but at the end of the day, it's fine. As long as we're putting points on the board, I really don't care. Interceptions, I'm going to go with about 12, same as 2019, his rookie year. And I think he's going to probably land in the 8 to 10 fumbles range lost, so he'll probably lose 8 to 10 fumbles. Like you said, Mike, I don't think this is going to be something that disappears overnight. It's going to be something that he needs to work on and develop because at the end of the day, his internal clock really wasn't there last season, which was what led to so many opportunities for him to lose the football. So I think it'll be a nice jump. We'll see a good improvement, something a 23-year-old quarterback in the league would be proud of. And then year 3, when this team is looking much better on defense and we have a bunch of new offensive weapons, I think he'll take a major step forward. So I agree with you guys on that point. However, the next thing I want to talk about is the mailbag, because we got some questions from Twitter, and I think those are going to be really good for us to answer right now. So from Kyle Scully, is this a make or break season for Jones, or will a new offensive coordinator and head coach give him additional time to become the Giants' long-term quarterback solution? So Anthony, I want you to answer this first. Do you think that this season is the most important for him? And if he doesn't perform well, we should just kind of give up hope? Or do you think bringing in this new regimen of coaching staff members is going to give him an extra few years to prove his worth?
Yeah, I think I kind of just touched on this, but I'll flesh it out more. I think year 3 is the year. I don't think this year is necessarily that important. I mean, if he completely implodes this year and we end up with like the first overall pick, you're gonna have that debate between Jones or Trevor Lawrence. And I know that there's been a few analysts who have floated that idea out pretty prematurely within the past week. But I think that, you know, you mentioned earlier the improvement of the offensive line and what that's going to do for Daniel Jones and the rest of the team. But I think more importantly, it's the addition of Jason Garrett that's going to really change and improve the team. I think that I much prefer his scheme over Pat Shurmur's scheme, the vertical scheme versus the West Coast scheme. I like run the ball and throw the ball deep, all the timing routes that Jason Garrett likes to implement. I think that those are the things that can really make a young quarterback excel and take that next step. But I just think that not this year. I don't think this is the most important year, but year 3 for Daniel Jones, that's when that jump takes place, and that's when it has to take place. Because if it doesn't happen in year 3, then we start to have that conversation about what comes next.
I agree with you, especially that first part I wrote down here. He'll have 2 years at least to prove that he's the guy, 2020 and 2021. If he absolutely implodes next year and has, just an awful, 10 touchdown, 25 interception type season, it might be a one and done or a 2 years and done type thing for Daniel Jones. But I'm not expecting that to happen. But he will have at least a couple years to prove he's the guy. I think he will ultimately, because he has everything around him that he needs, except for a star wide receiver, which I think we'll get in the next draft or maybe next free agency or whatever. So this, draft and offseason was about getting the offensive line right, getting some of the defensive positions right. So then next year they can probably splurge and get a great receiving weapon, hopefully. So I think right now he has the offensive line he needs. He has a really creative play caller in Jason Garrett, a guy that should be right for him, and has a good amount of weapons around him. I know it's not perfect. I know Sterling Shepard needs to stay healthy. I know Golden Tate, needs to stay out of suspension and stuff like that, which it only happened once, but still, he needs to be there. Darius Slayton needs to improve, and Evan Engram needs to stay on the football field. But if those things can happen, Daniel Jones can have a very good year next year, and I think as long as he's not complete trash in 2020, he'll definitely have a shot to be the quarterback in 2021, obviously.
I agree. I think year 2 is a big question mark for a lot of players, and even if he regresses a little bit, they should not be giving up on him. He's learning another offense right off the bat. Pretty much Joe Judge and Daniel Jones have been given like the worst start for any players ever. I mean, just look, we talked about Joe Judge last week, but now Daniel Jones comes in, learns a Pat Shurmur offense, they fire him, a coronavirus pandemic hits, he can't even train in person with his teammates. And now he's learning an entirely new offense virtually. And one that's been developed over the course of like 10 years. Jason Garrett's, been a head coach for a long time. He called plays, I think, from 2007 to 2013. So he has a lot of knowledge, a lot of stuff that's building into this playbook. We, should expect him to have some hiccups. It would be only fair for us to assume that. But with that being said, I think he's a really smart guy. He went to Duke. I think he was a redshirt at Duke. He was supposed to go to Stanford. So we know how intelligent Daniel Jones is. I think he's going to soak up all this information. He's going to train with his guys down in North Carolina, and I think he's going to come back ready to go. So that's how I see this all playing out. With that also being said, I think that if 2021 and he implodes that year, it's going to be tough to come back from that. With a team that's in a place to win now, essentially, which is kind of the whole concept behind this rebuild at the current stage we're in. If he implodes, it's going to be like, okay, if maybe there's a free agent quarterback available that we can bring in, or maybe they try and draft a guy. You never really know. But at a certain point, I don't expect that. I don't expect that to happen, but you never really know. On to the next question. Bull Bitler, kind of an interesting name, but we'll roll with it. Why did the Giants make the playoffs in 2020-2021 season? Anthony, I want you to kind of give your mentality about where this rebuild is and why we think that could happen.
I don't think it will happen, but if it does, it's going to be because of the coaching staff. Because I don't think that this roster has necessarily the amount of talent that we need to make the playoffs. But if this coaching staff can do all the things that they plan to do at the next level and really get the best out of each and every one of these players, then sure, maybe we could slip into the playoffs. It's possible. It's the NFL. Anything is possible. The Giants have definitely had those years where they were supposed to make the playoffs and didn't, and those years where they weren't supposed to and they did, and even won the Super Bowl in probably 2 of those seasons. So I don't think it's going to happen this year, especially when you look at how tough that schedule is, which we talked about a couple episodes ago. But if it does, I think it's going to be either because of how great the coaching staff did, or if Daniel Jones does take that phenomenal year 2 jump and is like an MVP candidate and just leads us to the playoffs. Those are the only 2 ways that I could really see it happening at this point.
The question was, how do they make the playoffs, right? I missed the question.
Yeah. How do the Giants make the playoffs next season?
My things I wrote down here: mistake-free football, can't have turnovers, win the turnover battle, run the ball efficiently and effectively, and then win the time possession battle. Those are the 4 things I think that needs to happen here. So take care of the ball, obviously. If you win the turnover battle, you give yourself a much better chance of winning the game, of course. And I do think it's possible, as long as Daniel Jones takes care of the fumbles, which we hope happens. I don't think he's going to throw a bunch of interceptions next year. Saquon Barkley does not put the ball on the ground. And if we can get, a few lucky interceptions that go our way and some tip passes that go our way and stuff like that, then things could happen. Crazier things have happened. There's an extra playoff spot this year, so it could happen, but it really comes down to just protecting the ball, running it effectively, and then take it from there.
Right. And Mike, I want you to, if you can, make a video on this, how the Giants can make the playoffs, because it seems like you've already written some stuff down. You have some ideas. So I think this could be a really cool idea. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple iTunes, you should go check out our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Really awesome content there. Mike and I and Anthony have been producing so many cool things, and hopefully to do a few new cool giveaways in the future. But my answer to the question is essentially, I think the only way they make the playoffs is, like you said, Mike, foolproof football. They can't be making in-game mistakes. Joe Judge has to really solve that problem. No more Pat Shurmur problems and mistakes like that. So the other thing is, I think the only way they're going to get into the playoffs is if they win the division. In my opinion, the schedule's too tough for them to win and make a wild card spot. I think they're going to have to win the division to really sneak in. Personally, Dallas is going to be really hard to beat and overcome, but they don't have a very good defense. I mean, their secondary is like shredded. So we'll see what happens. They're expecting Awuzie to take a big step forward. They lost Byron Jones in free agency. Their free safety is older than Jason Witten at this point. So I think
Jeff Heath is gone too, their safety.
Jeff Heath. They have Darian Thompson back there, who is our outcast.
They got that cornerback out of Alabama in the 2nd round, right? I'm forgetting.
Oh, Trayvon, my boy, yeah.
Yeah,
Trayvon Diggs.
I think he's going to be pretty good. So
we'll see. Hopefully Darius Slayton torches him over and over again. But
yeah, right.
The reality is, I think they're going to have to win the division. This schedule is really, really tough. And in my opinion, I don't think we're making the playoffs in 2020. I think the season after is probably our best bet. But we'll see what happens. Miracles do happen, as we saw on our 2 Super Bowl wins. So, on to the next question. Do you see the Giants making any more moves before the season starts? This is by Evan Harris. Anthony, what do you think?
I think depending on how this DeAndre Baker situation plays out, we could definitely be looking at a cornerback signing. I know a lot of fans, as soon as they heard the news, were like, yo, Logan Ryan, what's good? And I don't necessarily think we've got the money for him, but money can be moved around if we need to. Yeah, that's steep. So, but if it has to happen, it can happen. But hopefully it's not necessary. It looks like it's not going to be. But other than that, I don't really see any reasons to make any roster additions. I just think that we're really, really low on cap space, so it's probably best to just hold on to what we have and hope for the best heading into the season.
Yeah, I agree. It really comes down to the DeAndre Baker stuff. And, of course, we'll make some signings in August and stuff like that when guys are cut. But I do think a signing they could make is probably a veteran cornerback. And I brought up Brandon Carr before. I know Chris, the entertainer, brought that up as well. So I do think Carr would be a great option. He's 34 years old now, but he hasn't missed a game in his career. Durable guy and a good teammate from what I read. So I think that'd be a good option. Has that connection with Jason Garrett and their secondaries coach as well. So I think that'd be a decent fit for the Giants.
Yeah, I think Brandon Carr on like a 1-year deal might make sense, seeing how this Baker thing plays out. Nonetheless, I don't know if we can trust Sam Beal. That's my biggest concern, is that we can't really trust Sam Beal to come in there and fill in an injury or supplement any loss of a player. his injury history is too scary for me. He's missed essentially 2 almost full seasons. He played in 6 games, started in 3 last year, and he had like almost an 80% completion percentage against. So for a cornerback, that is really bad. That's like worse than freaking your guy Blake Martinez in coverage, So that's a big concern for me. I think anything on a 1-year deal, I'm fine with. I'm fine with bringing in anybody on a 1-year deal because, like you guys said, we don't have much cap space to spend in general. I think we have to be saving up as much as we can for next season because that's when we're going to make a big splash and hopefully, contend for a playoff position. But a 1-year deal this season makes the most sense. I don't think they're going to. I think that's why Dave Gettleman drafted so many depth pieces this year and last year. He wants to develop his own guys. He doesn't want to bring in other guys for 1 year. For what reason? They're in the middle of a rebuild. There's no reason to bring in any other people. So also Leslie V also had the same question. So I'll give a little shout out to her as well. But I don't think they're going to bring in anybody. They brought in so much depth in the later rounds. Develop your guys, see who pans out, and then utilize that moving forward. Save your cap space, and just really focus on the development of your own foundation, your own youth. That's how I would see this playing out, and I think that's the best way to go about it. But the last question from Jonathan Green is, what can we realistically expect from Lorenzo Carter this year? Anthony, what are you thinking?
I don't know if I expect too much from him. He really disappointed me last season. I got my hopes a little bit too high heading into last season because he was really tearing it up in training camp, so I figured he was going to take a big step forward in the regular season. But it never really happened. He had some games where he showed some flashes, but I think realistically I expect him to be a rotational pass rusher, and I think if anyone's more likely to take that jump, it's O'Shane Ximines. And I know we've all raved and ranted about him on the podcast a few times. So, Lorenzo Carter, one of those more disappointing players to me. And I'd also like to see if they try to move him inside at all. I think he's definitely shown some potential, like he could move to inside linebacker. So I'd like to see if they could do that, but I think he's just a rotational pass rusher who's going to have some moments, get a couple sacks, 5 at the most on the season, though. So that's my expectations, but hopefully I'm wrong about that and he blows those expectations out of the water.
Yeah, I agree with basically all that. I think he's a rotational player behind O'Shane Ximines and Kyler Fackrell. I think we might see 3 or 4 sacks, maybe 8 to 10 tackles for loss. I don't expect any huge numbers. They could move him inside. That's another option, obviously. If they, that's an option to get more playing time, of course. If anyone gets injured in the linebacking core, whether it's outside or inside guys, at least you can try and move him to either spot. So he might have a chance to start at some point in the season, but if everyone stays healthy, I don't expect him to play that much. So that's probably my realistic expectation for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at his stats right now. He really sucked last year. Like, big time. His 2018 numbers were actually pretty good. Like, he only played in 40% of defensive snaps. He played majority of snaps on special teams, 53%. So he played 441 defensive snaps. And he had 4 sacks. He had 43 combined tackles, 10 quarterback hits. Now, fast forward to 2019. He's 24 years old. Now he's playing 65% of snaps, which actually compared to 2018 was almost double the amount of snaps from his rookie season. But he played a lot less special teams. His numbers were a little bit better. With doubling his number of snaps, his numbers were just a little bit better in each category. He had half a sack more. He had 1 forced fumble. He had 1 more pass defended, 3 more quarterback hits. He really didn't add that much value to the team. And look at this. This is the most concerning statistic I've ever seen.
I know you're going to say the tackles, isn't it?
Yeah. He went from 2018, he went from 0% missed tackles. He missed 0 tackles on 43 combined, so he had 43 opportunities. He missed 0. Last season, he had a 15% missed tackle rate. So he went from 0 to 15%. He missed 8 tackles. 8 tackles he missed. That is absurd for a guy to actually regress that much. I don't know why. I have no idea why. It was his second year in James Betcher's scheme. You'd think he would know kind of what's going on a little bit more. He had a year of experience under his belt. Maybe they were facing better offensive lines, but I don't really think so. There were some really bad teams they put against that he just really didn't show up in. The only game he showed up against was the New England Patriots. I think he had like 2 sacks that game, which was half of his sacks in the year. He had that strip sack on Tom Brady that Marcus Golden ran back for a touchdown. That was like his highlight. And clearly he's capable of doing it. Clearly he's capable of beating his man, and he's getting after the quarterback. It's not a problem for him. But for whatever reason, he just couldn't get it. He had a 4.5 40-yard dash. The guy's fast as hell. So I don't really know what to say about him except for he has the traits. He has the tangible traits. He has the intangible traits. He's very capable of being a good pass rusher. He just hasn't figured it out yet. Maybe he had a sophomore slump in year 3. He explodes onto the scene. Him and Oshie and has become like ridiculously good pass rushers. That's my dream. We don't know if that's actually going to happen. But I think that he'll see a little bit more of an improvement this year. I think they're probably going to relegate him behind Ximenez. Maybe lower his percentage to like 50% of snaps, especially if Marcus Golden's retained. But Golden plays a really big factor in this as well. Do you guys actually think Golden will end up with the Giants this year?
Probably, I think so. He really doesn't seem to have much of a market in free agency, unfortunately for him. I definitely think he deserves one, but it doesn't seem like it's coming to fruition, so I think there's a pretty good chance he ends up back with the Giants. But I don't know necessarily if it's necessary to bring him back. I think we discussed that on one of the other episodes, but I think he'll come back, yeah.
Yeah, as I said before, we both agree they don't need him, but I think by default it might happen because, based on this weird contract thing they did, if no one claims him by a certain date, then he'll probably be a Giant for 1 year and $5 million, I think it is. So
yeah,
he'll probably be here next year.
Yeah. I don't know, man. We're going to see, but I think we have one last question, and it is, will fans be allowed inside MetLife? If so, how do you think the logistics will be? That's a really interesting question. This is by Afro Skinner. Another cool name. People have some really interesting... I thought the other guy was Bullbiter. I was like, okay, that's also interesting. What do I think about MetLife? That's a really tough one because we don't really know what's going to happen in New York right now. Living in New York, it's not looking too great. They've set up a system where you have to check off 7 boxes, essentially, to be allowed to start a reopen. Then it goes by phase. So they've cut up New York into specific regions. You have to hit the 7 boxes, and then they start to open you up by phases. I have a lot of friends that work in New York City that aren't allowed to go back, or like they're working from home until September. It's only May. It's only May right now, and they've already called it until September. That's a really, really big sign that this is not ending anytime soon. I don't think fans will be allowed inside MetLife, in my personal opinion. I saw in Germany in the Bundesliga. I know one of our listeners is German, so shout out to you, Jan. Really, really interesting thing they're doing. They're actually paying $20.60 per fan to get a cardboard cutout put into the stadium, so it looks like there's fans there, and then they inject kind of sound like music and fan noises into the field to make it simulate that entire experience. But the Giants could do something like that. Highly doubtful because all the cardboard boxes would fly away. MetLife is so windy. Daniel Jones getting sacked by cardboard boxes now. I don't think there'll be fans. The logistics, if there are, they'll only be able to. They'll essentially have to allow a certain number of people in wearing masks and protective gear, and they'll have to be seated like specific lengths away from each other, and they'll have to have security and ensuring that happens. That's the only way I can see it working. But being that it's an outside arena, if they seat them far enough apart, they can get some fans in there.
Yeah, if I had to make a prediction, I'm going to predict there's not going to be fans. It's just for every reason that you explained, the logistics of it, it's really tough. We really don't want a second wave. I know a lot of people have warned that there's going to be like a second wave of coronavirus, and I think the best way to avoid a second wave is to, not get all together and start spreading the germs again, which, that's a lot of people. It's like, 70,000 people in one stadium if they just reopen it, which, I don't think it's possible. I don't think they can do it. Not this year. Hopefully next year, though.
Yeah, for some reason, I have a good feeling we're going to get football this year, but in terms of fans being allowed in the stadium, I just don't see that happening. I hope I'm wrong because it would be pretty weird without it, but, at the end of the day, we just want football, and I just don't think fans are going to be allowed in the stadium yet.
Yeah. Also, it's important to note that the stadium is in New Jersey, so they apply to different rules than in New York. I think it's kind of similar. I'm not entirely sure about that, but we'll see. New Jersey might open it up before New York does. All we can do is wait and see. This is kind of like the weirdest thing any of us have ever been through, I'm sure. I'm only 23 years old. we're all pretty young, so I imagine even for the older guys and gals, this is probably something that you never thought would happen in your lifetime. However, I guess it's a pretty good time for it to happen. We're seeing a lot of companies go virtual, and we're seeing how all of these in-person meetings can be expelled. I know I went to my previous job, I had to go to meetings in the office all the time, and now I'm realizing those office meetings were absolutely pointless. Like, I never had to go to those. We could have easily just done like a Zoom call and got the same amount of information. I didn't have to travel an hour and a half at 7 in the morning to go to the office just to go back into Manhattan. So that is how I feel about it. I'm pretty sure people feel the same way. I'm excited for things to open back up, though. Nonetheless, I miss humanity. I miss my friends. I'm sure everyone feels the same. But cheers to everybody who's drinking, who's not drinking. It's there's not much to do these days, so I've been trying all new beers out. If you're in the same boat, leave your favorite beer in the comments section. If you're listening on YouTube, obviously you can hit us up on Twitter. I want to thank everyone who tuned in for this week's episode, just to be in part of the community, and I want to get some cool merchandise out to you guys soon. I'm going to start getting some magnets I'll send out, and I also am getting my designer to create a t-shirt that's New York Tough with the SM on it. So that should be kind of cool to give out, and do some cool raffles. I've been doing some on Twitter, which have gone well. So thank you again, and I'll give Anthony and Mike the last say.
Yeah, just thanks again. Stay safe. Keep weathering the storm. It seems like we're almost there. Things are starting to reopen. I hope everybody is safe and healthy, and I'm excited for football to hopefully come back, as we all are in agreement. We think it's going to, even though it's going to be without fans. But yep, stay safe. Thanks for listening, and have a good one.
Yeah, you mentioned the whole Zoom call and meetings thing. This whole thing has made my picking up Chipotle orders a lot easier because I've been doing it on my app now. So that's one positive out of this. So I'll put that out there. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get on that that diet after all this, my friend.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Chipotle must be treating you nicely.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys later. I'll talk to you next time.